On today's Tech Time Tuesday, we're going to be talking about twin tube KONI manual adjust shocks, how they work, and why you can't install them upside down.
Hello, and welcome to Tech Time Tuesday.
Science! Tech Time Tuesday. Tech Time Tuesday. Test and verify. No more guessing why. Let's begin.
This video,
I
man.
know, right?
Okay, so on our vise in the shop here, we've got now this is a pretty old demo unit from KONI, but it still does the job. We've been installing KONI shocks for many years. This unit's probably 20 years old or more, but it does show how a twin tube manual adjust KONI works. So again, this is a twin tube. What does that mean? You've got an inner tube, inner working cylinder, with your piston rod and main piston attached to that. And then you've got an outer cylinder or reserve cylinder, reserve tube, whatever you want to call it. You can watch the fluid level rise in that reserve chamber as the piston goes down. And then as I extend the shock, the level goes back down as more fluid, more fluid fills that main chamber because the whole volume of that piston rod is not there anymore. So something has to replace it. The fluid has to replace it. Shock absorbers work by keeping the piston in contact with fluid. You don't want to get air in there. That's cavitation, and that really reduces the effectiveness quite a bit. So again, manual adjust twin tube KONI shock. So it's important to note that you've actually got two different valves in this design of shock. So you've got your main valve or piston valve, and in this case, that adjusts your rebound damping. So rebound is as the shock is extending. Compression damping, when the shock is being compressed. So when you're hitting a bump in the road, that corner of the coach is dipping down, the shock is being shortened. That is controlled by the base valve or foot valve, which is basically in between the that inner tube and outer chamber of the shock absorber. And because you've got those two different sets of valves, that allows the rebound damping to be adjusted independently without affecting the compression damping. And that's actually a big advantage we feel of the KONI manual adjust shocks for motorhome applications, because we find that for motorhome applications, rebound damping is really critical for giving you control without giving you as much of a ride quality penalty as what you might have from running a lot of compression damping. So that being said, let's take a look at how this actually works. But before we do that, I want to ask you to like and subscribe to this video so that you stay up to date on helpful videos like this where we cover all manner of topics. In order to adjust the rebound damping of this shock, I'm going to compress it completely. Now watch that little tooth there. It's going to get locked in. So see now how that pawl, it turns a little bit and then it stops. So as I rotate this all the way down, what am I doing? I am adding preload to that valve controlling my rebound damping. If I rotate it back out, now I am reducing preload. Now it's important to note that using the old arm dyno, you may not feel a lot of difference in rebound control of a manual adjust KONI shock for most, if not all, of the range of adjustment. And that's because simply by adding preload to that valve, you're not really going to feel that in the slow speeds that we're able to extend shock absorbers, because that slow speed control, that's actually controlled by a different path of oil. That's the bypass or bleed hole in that main piston rod, and that is actually not affected by adjusting preload on the valve. That valve only gets forced open at higher speeds of extension of the shock. Now, the exception to that is near max adjustment on a KONI shock. You can actually start to cover that hole, so restrict that bypass passage. and that will give you a lot more low-speed sway control. It can really start to firm up the ride quite a bit. That is where you will actually really notice the difference in resistance. So let's just demonstrate. So we'll back this all the way off. I can extend it pretty quick there. A little more rebound damping than there is compression damping in this demo unit. Now we'll turn this clockwise, go about as much as we can. Now I'm going to try pulling it out. See how much harder I have to work to pull that out. So that is because we're actually starting to cover that bypass hole, and my compression damping is unaffected. That's because that's controlled by the foot valve. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know where to adjust my KONI shocks? Really depends on the application. So if you've got KONI shocks, manual adjust shocks for your coach, please give us a call. SuperSteer Parts, 888-898-3281. We can help you out. I do also want to talk now about why it's important to not install a twin tube shock upside down. So we'll back this off just to make it easier to work. And so we'll make sure that the shock is fully bled. We don't have, all right, we don't have air in the system. So we're going to actually take this off and install it upside down just so you can see what happens and why it doesn't work so well. All right, now I'm going to try to hold these lights here to kind of show, because now the whole body of the shock is going to be moving up and down. The first thing you'll notice is, so we still have fluid in our main, the working cylinder there, but on the outer cylinder now our base valve is no longer submerged. Now we've got air next to it because all the fluid has gone down to what was the top. Now it's the bottom of that outer cylinder. So let's start moving this up and down, see what happens. See how we're getting air in our main working cylinder now? Watch how fast I can move that. I can compress air. I can't compress fluid very well, but I sure can compress air quick. See how we're getting all of those air bubbles in there? Now we have seen this in the field. People install KONI shocks upside down, and we hear from them, these shocks are not working good at all. That's why. You get all of that movement where the shock is doing nothing. You're just compressing air. Not to mention, even when that piston is still submerged in the fluid, we've got all kinds of cavitation. We've got a lot of, or sorry, not cavitation, emulsion. A lot of emulsion. We've drawn a lot more air to be mixed in with that fluid now, and it's just really reducing the effectiveness of that shock. So don't do that. Now, the good news is that if that has happened, if you do have twin tube shocks that have been installed upside down, and I will note that that goes not just for manual adjust twin tube shocks, any twin tube shock, you cannot install them upside down. They have to be installed right way up. The good news is they're probably not damaged unless they've either bottomed or topped out, and actually, you know, just because of that lack of damping, something has gotten damaged. But we'll flip this back over. And we'll just cycle this a few times. We still have a little bit of air mixed in there, but we forced most of it out back into that outer chamber. Now the shock is basically working as it should. All right, and you can see this in a real world example. So we're going to swap this out for our SuperSteer SS88 1889. So these are made for the back of the Sprinter 3500 Class C. You've seen us do several videos on these already, including how to adjust them, but we'll just do a little refresher here. Good and tight. These shocks are stout. All right, so again, you compress it completely. We're backed all the way off there. You can see just how much force it takes. These are a very aggressive shock, so we really worked hard to get these things valved for the back of those Sprinter Classics to cut down on that sway. So lots of force to extend it, very strong in rebound. Let's watch in compression. You can see, so we ran softer in compression on these shocks because the back leaf springs of the Sprinter chassis, they're pretty stiff. You've got friction happening back there. You don't need a lot of compression damping on a leaf spring suspension. The springs are already so stiff. What you really want is for that rebound control. Now, some may argue from an off-roading standpoint, well, you need compression damping to give you that control, and that's true, but most people on a Sprinter 3500 Class C motorhome, you're not doing a whole lot of off-roading. Most of your driving is done on the highway. So that's really what these are geared towards, is those primarily on-highway applications. Now let's watch what happens if now again, it's a lot of work to extend that thing. Let's see what happens if I adjust it all the way tight. Not something that we would recommend you do. Typically we recommend about 1.25 turns. Now let's count our turns to see how much. Typically these are about 1 3/4 turns. So 1/2 turn, 1 turn, 1.5, almost 2 turns full. So we're almost 2 turns tight on this. Yeah, I can barely extend that enough to unlock the adjuster pawl. So you really don't want to run them that stiff, but just know that these are a strong shock. So don't let anyone ever tell you that just because a KONI or our SuperSteer shocks that are made by KONI, that just because they're soft in compression that they're a weak shock. That's not true. This is a very stout shock. So anyway, we're big fans of KONI twin tube adjustable shocks, as well as their FSD, the FSD, Evo FSD. KONI shocks work really well for motorhome applications. Their twin tube architecture does work well. That being said, there are some differences, advantages, disadvantages of twin tube versus monotube, which we really didn't get to in this video. Be looking in the future for a video that delves into a little bit more of those differences between monotubes and twin tubes. So please, again, like and subscribe so you stay up to date on content, including that upcoming video. So let us know in the comments below what you think, if we got it right, or if there's anything that we missed here, if there's anything you'd like for us to cover in the future. And until next time, we want to wish you safer and happier driving.
Tech Time Tuesday.
I thought that's what you wanted.
That was perfect, because now I have one video to do it in.
All right. Okay. Good. Yeah. I had a moment of panic.
Sorry. All right, outtakes are over. We're back. I'm not going to leave that in there.